So I returned home to, I needed family, I needed people who, no matter how challenging, were family. I needed those people around me. There's a sort of blood relationship, and so I moved in, and she really had got worse. My father almost had a production line of homebrew in the basement, flagon after flagon after flagon, that I could see she was, slowly getting through. While she was sober, she was okay, but most of the time she wasn't. And so the mornings tended to be all right, because she wasn't really sort of drinking at that point in the morning. But as the day went on, then it slowly got worse, and I had to get out for the sake of my own sanity while still living there and find things to do. And once again, I sort of got back into door-to-door selling, and I ended up working for a home improvement company as a door-to-door salesman, and I did phenomenally well. I was earning £200-300 for every deal I closed at that point. It was like, well, there was nobody else around really doing anything at that point. In terms of home improvement, I think we just got sort of in at the very beginning of it, and we were very lucky that wherever we went, people wanted the sort of cavity wall insulation, because I think there was a grant being given for it at that time. And I would just sign up, deal after deal after deal. But in order to, I suppose, escape the long days and, door to door, walking around the streets, and then in contrast going home to difficult situations, I used to go to the pub. As soon as I got my check through on the Friday, because they paid weekly, I'd be off to the pub, and I would spend £200 a night easily over the bar. I get to the stage where I'd be buying the whole pub drinks, because I did feel quite isolated. To the point where I would again, repeating from childhood, I would actually send offer things so that people would write to me, so that I'd have something back, or I would order stuff for myself again. But I would very often, contact companies, and just for the sake of having somebody to write, that would write to me. So my alcohol kind of got worse, and hers got worse, and I developed really quite a hatred for her, because I was trying to get my life together, and I was phoning up places and calling into places to get jobs, and I would have to leave a phone number, and people would invariably call back, and apparently her answer would be, oh God, or I've never heard of him, or, he's not here, he doesn't live here, what are you phoning this number for? And she got quite abusive with people, but as I say, which I didn't know anything about, until eventually I started to get feedback from people that this is what they were being told. So it was incredibly difficult, and once again getting to know people, then trying to make work friends, and then having come back to my place was really difficult, because again she would be abusive or rude to them, or run me down in front of them, and consequently I would never hear from them again. Girlfriends and things, she'd be very difficult with. I remember taking one girlfriend home, and you know, taking her upstairs for a seeing to, just for the hell of it, just to really pee her off. I had 2 or 3 on the go, and I had a Monday and Tuesday one, and a Wednesday and Thursday, and I think there was a Sunday one as well, and then the rest of the days I'd have off. So I kind of worked it. I was well looked after, and I was doing, you know, starting to get up on and do photography stuff and get back into the adult stuff at the same time, because it was kind of what I knew from previous years. And then I ended up starting to do escort work again. And then I owned my own agency, and then I had 2 or 3 agencies that were all over the place. I was just knocking back the drink. And I actually went to an AA meeting once, and I walked out. Because, once again, this whole embarrassment thing of the family, it was in my head. And when it got to the point where I was going to have to stand up and say, look, you know, my name is John and I'm an alcoholic, I walked out. I couldn't do it. I decided then that the only way I could do it was to help myself. I couldn't trust anybody, you know. I didn't trust anybody, because that was the life I'd led. You didn't trust people. And everything I had to do myself. But it was still difficult to really give up the booze, because I was having a great, you know, I was having a great time down on the south coast and having this photo studio, and I kind of got into publishing a local magazine at that point. There was so much going on, and I kind of made money, but then I'd had different bank accounts, and I was maxing out one and then supporting it with another, and maxing out that one and then getting a loan from the other one, and you know, it just kind of got very messy. And I think, you know, I got through a serious amount of money that wasn't really mine, but I was out of my mind again, you know, completely out of control, with mother home on one side and me there, and worrying about her and worrying about myself. And I eventually had to move back again to home. And I was already advertising in the back of Amateur Photography, you know, studio, model hire. We had about 30 girls. I had about 30 girls on the books at that time. And when these videos came out, the video cameras, which were very expensive, I mean, you were talking over £1,000 back in, you know, in the day in the 80s, and they were massive, great cameras. Not like the little things you get now. And only those with money could afford to get them from Dixon's. So I saw an opportunity there for filming, because up at that point the only films that anybody could buy were very much under the counter at these sort of sex shops, and invariably they cost a lot of money. Or else the other alternative was to actually import them from Sweden at that time. And so I put this advert in, and I'd found this other girl to work with, and we were charging £75 an hour each, and people were paying that money. We worked out a script for ourselves and everything, so we would do all the direction for them. We would just run the whole, all they had to do was film it for themselves, and earn a staggering amount of money out of that. Phenomenal amounts of money out of that. And I needed to get away, because again it was all kind of too much. And I'd had this dream where I'd got this gypsy caravan, and I'd disappeared off. So I decided to phone up the local radio station and tell this presenter that I'd had this dream and that I had to go on the radio because somebody out there had this gypsy caravan. And he went, oh yeah, sure, you know, very funny, daddy, I'll do it. And he did. And surely enough, somebody phoned in and said, yeah, I've got a gypsy caravan, I'm not using it. So with that, I went off and I checked it out, and it seemed to be fine. There's a little bit of repair work to do. I found somebody down in Cornwall who could actually do that. I'd found somebody else who wants to pay the mortgage on my place while I was gone. A very trustworthy, surprisingly trustworthy person. That was the first thing to trust somebody, but did. And with that, I got myself a horse and gypsy caravan, and just went off into the sunset. Just disappeared. And on my own, I lived pretty much the life of a hermit for a while. And I'd found a field that I could stay in, and at first people were a little bit wary of me because they thought others were going to come in like following and all the rest of it, but I sort of, over a while, I built up their confidence in me, and I stayed there, and eventually the storms came and ripped the caravan apart. It just tore it to pieces, and I ended up again without anywhere to live, and the horse. So I sold the horse, and built this sort of gypsy bender type thing out of tarpaulin and hazel branches, and became a bit of an encampment. And I worked on myself. I'd go into Plymouth to New Age bookshops, and I would buy books on self-improvement, real spiritual stuff that I needed to grow up, to find myself again, really. And I meditated, and I did lots of things which were very new to me. And I picked up this book on creative visualization once. I think it was an author called Shakti Gawain, reading her books. And so I started to practice this creative visualization. What would I like? I'd like chickens, and sure enough, within days, people would be asking me if I wanted chickens. They'd just come up saying, do you want some chickens? So then I kind of went through the creative visualization process again and asked for other things. Or I'd like some furniture. And then sure enough, people would turn up and offer me furniture. And I went through all this creative visualization stuff, and people would just turn up and offer me things. I once decided I wanted to put a little cold frame together so that I could grow things. And within 2 days, the guys who were fitting new double glazing down the road turned up and said, look, can you make use of these? And so I kind of built this encampment from this sort of small bender to an extension tent. It had a bedroom, and it had a lounge on the other side, and it had a little wood burner in there, and there was a kind of an indoor reception place when it was really raining that I could just sit, and people would come round, and families would turn up, and we'd sit around the campfire in the evening, and it's incredible, absolutely incredible thing that happened. And it was a bit like, what's that place in Scotland where I forget the name of it. There was a place in Scotland that kind of did the same thing, where they went there and never expected to grow anything, and all of a sudden they did, and they built this kind of community out of it. And it was very much like that, where I sort of just built this community. But eventually the owners of the field decided that they wanted to expand and put up another warehouse, and it was time for me to move on. And I'd become quite spiritual and joined a sort of a Plymouth-based spiritual community and got to know people. And when my sort of field wrapped up, then I ended up in Taunton in Somerset, and with people up there that I knew, I became housed there eventually, and I had a little flat, and met my what was to be my future partner there, really. And she had already had children, and once again it was that family, it was being part of that family that I needed to be grounded. And so we got together, and eventually, you know, we kind of moved in together, and she had my son, well, our son. And for the first time in my life, I'd experienced something that it was an achievement. For my son to be born in the world was like such a major achievement. Because all of a sudden it was family that wasn't abusive or wasn't alcoholic. It was, in a sense, my child, and I'd done something for the first time in my life, which was a positive contribution. As far as I was concerned, it made such a difference to my world to have a son, you know. Such a difference. What I felt was, a real family that I hadn't known. It was a major impact on my life. And, we lived in South Devon, and even that was quite challenging because I wasn't used to having people around me. So I just had my little space, and they had their little space. And we kind of get together, and we'd sleep together, and then she would say to me sometimes, well, I almost feel like you should have a place at the end of the garden, and just come in when you need to eat. Because as much as I wanted the family, it was a struggle for me. It was a real challenge for me to be around people. As much as I needed it, it was a struggle. And the only way I could cope with it was to shut myself away from it and then go back into it when I felt I needed it, and then come back out again when I felt I needed to come back out and have my own little world again. And I think that really put a strain on things. Because my partner at that time kind of wanted me to be fully inclusive, understandably. But I found that very difficult. My son was important to me. And I absolutely adored my son. He was, looking back, he was probably more my world than the rest, my partner was, and her children, really. He was my boy. And it was challenging, but it was also really enjoyable in other ways. And little did I know that it would be taken away from me, in the not too distant future. So then I felt a complete failure. I'd not only lost my home and everything else, but it felt that I was losing my son.